So, hello, I'll be presenting my crude application. It's basically an application about real estate where buyers and sellers can either browse and browse properties to if they're interested of buying one, or sellers that wants to add their property to the website so they can sell it. So, the main target of the audience, like I just said, are the buyers, people that want to buy a property, and sellers, the ones that want to sell their properties. So those are the two main targets. Well, we so I'm gonna go through each pages of the website. So the first one, as you can see, is the home page. The home page doesn't have anything too fancy. There's two buttons here: the properties and the ad. We're not gonna click on it uh, because we already have links on top. So let's go on properties here. So as you can see, there's no property added because I just ran the my back end, so it's empty right now. We also have the add page. This is where we can add a property and the seller information. There's the update. This is where we can update the status of a property, either available or sold. You also have the delete, which is basically you can delete a property. So as you can see, it's empty now. So we're gonna add a property. I already have like a bunch of information already prepared. So I'll put my name. Here we go. My first name, last name, email, phone. Now I need to create a key, which is this key is bind to a seller and to a property. So I'll use ABC123. So this will be my key, my security key that I can use to update or delete. It's going to be a house, province. Now I need to put the URL of an image. So I think I'm just going to put really just let's put this house, I guess. The price, I can choose any price, say 500,000, number of beds, let's do 4 and then 2 baths, like 5 beds. And when you're done, you're going to click add. And as you can see at the top here, it says property added successfully. So we also have notification that tells you if it was added properly or something went wrong. So there you go. So if we go into properties, as you can see, there you go. The house has been added. So 500,000. We have the email, the address, number of beds, number of baths, the type, which is a house, last name, first name, the phone, and then the email, and then the properties, the property address, the property ID. Sorry. So I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna add another one. So I'm gonna use a different key, ABC450. The image. Let's do this one, 450,000. 5 again. Let's do 3 bats. There you go. Property added successfully. As you can see, we have another property with the information that I used, Taufik Jahar. So now let's update. So with the update, you need the ID of the property. And the ID is here, the 1, the 2, and it goes on. So I need the ID. Let's say we want number 2 and the key. So we need the key of this particular property and seller. So update number 2, which is ABC540, and then select the status. At first, the property is available, but now I want to make it sold. Like I sold the property. So I update, property updated successfully, as you can see at the top. We go back to property, and as you can see, the property is now sold. It has a different kind of design. It's not really sold, but we still have the ID at the bottom because we need to update it. If we want to update it again and make it available, then just in case something happens, you know. So 2 ABC450 available, update, property updated successfully. You see, and it's back to it's now available again. So now let's delete the ID. Let's say we want to delete the first one, and the key is ABC123. Property deleted successfully. As you can see, the first one is now gone. I also want to show you something if I'm trying to update a property and the key doesn't match. Let's say property number 2, and the key doesn't really match. Let's say I use this one, available, sold. It gives me an error saying unauthorized key does not match property ID. I mean, it's the wrong key. It also applies to delete. So if I also put like number 4 for ID and the key 450, trying to update, error occurred. Basically, the ID doesn't exist. So basically, this is my website. This is my CRUD application. We can get all the properties that have been added. We can add, like I said, we can update the status of a property, and we can delete a property. And it uses like this special feature of like using a security key, which is bind to a property in a seller. So yeah, this is for my website. This is the demo of my website. Now we'll be looking at the front end. So for my front end, I'll try to do as quickly as I can because this video needs to be under 5 minutes. So I'm using a React router, which means that I'm making like I made a multi-page website. So basically I have I think it's the app.js. Yeah, app.js. Each thing is kind of like a link. When I click on it, the URL the end of URL changes, and based off the end of the URL, it generates a different component, and the components are basically the pages. So if at the end of the URL is /properties, the properties element will be kind of rendered, and based on the whatever I click is going to render the proper. So each page has a different HTTP request. So the properties page does the get, as you can see, axios.get, and then you put the URL and then the response and then the set. I set the array of properties, and then I display them with the property card component. Property card component is the one that you saw with the images and then the information. With the dot map, properties dot map. So, yep. For the add, it's basically using where is it? The post HTTP request. So I pass to it a property, which is basically the payload and the URL, and it also uses the notification like the React Toastify. So I created the when properties added successfully and when there's an error. So yeah. There you go. I use them here for the update. It's basically similar to the other one, but it's a patch. It's not a put because I'm partially adding because I'm partially updating property, not the entirety of it. Again, I'm using React Toastify for the notifications. So there's unauthorized, error, and property updated. What else? For the delete, it's basically the same thing as the update. You have property delete, error, unauthorized, and it uses a .delete HTTP request. The problem that I faced basically is trying to pass a payload to a delete or to an update, like the patch. So the way that I did it is we need to add the keyword data here and pass some kind of like an object. So I wanted to pass the ID and the key, so I needed to pass the data. Well, that's what Stack Overflow told me. So data, and this is how I fix it. So now it worked. Also, you have the update. I couldn't pass an actual payload to it, so I had to put like the curly braces and actually write everything down. So yeah, basically that's my front end, and I'm using Tailwind. As you can see, let's go to my home page. I'm using Tailwind for styling my page. Yep, it's basic. Now we'll be looking at the back end. So once again, I'll try to do this backend as quickly as possible because it needs to be under 5 minutes. So if we look at the controller, it has all my HTTP mapping. So I have the get mapping, the post mapping, where I add the property. So for the get mapping, it returns a list of property response. And inside that property response, there's a nested property, no, a seller response too. We have the post, basically add the property to the database. And we have the patch mapping. Also, the post mapping returns a property response. And the property response basically returns everything we added except the security key because we don't want to return that to the client, just in case somebody kind of, we don't want anyone hacking the property or something like that. So property response. So we have the patch mapping, which is basically partially updating the property, the status. And we have and also it takes a request body, and the delete also takes a request body, also for the post. So they all take in bodies. So also deletes the property. We have the entity. We have two entities. We have the property entities with all the the fields, the ID, image URL, price, address, province, beds, bath, type, status, and we have here the seller, a seller of type seller. So as you can see, there's the many to one relationship, meaning that one seller can have many properties, or properties can be, no, a property can be owned by only one seller, but a seller can have many properties. We also have the seller entity. Basically, there you go. It has the ID, first name, last name, phone, email, and seller key, which is a security key. And we have the constructor here. We have the exception. We have two exception. Key does not match. It's basically when it's unauthorized, it throws a 401 exception. So, and they both extend from the runtime exception. So if the key doesn't match the property, the key that is bind to the property and the seller, then it's gonna throw this exception. And you have resource not found. Resource not found. Actually, the key does not match. Is this one? Sorry. HTTP status unauthorized. And resource not find is basically if we're trying to get, we're trying to update or delete a property and we enter like the wrong, so an ID that doesn't exist, then this is the error that's going to give us. The ID is not found, like the not found. So that's the purpose of those two exceptions. We have the repository, which is basically, they both extend from the CRUD repository, and we need to specify the type, which is a property, which is the type of the entity, like the table, and then you have the type of the ID, which is long, and also the same thing for the seller. And this, we can use this in the services to kind of have access to the database. It gives us methods to actually have access to the database and get find all by IDs, blah blah blah. So, and they're both interfaces. So we have the request. So we have four type of requests. We have delete property request, seller request, update request. It's basically just when you try to add, this is what we need to get from the client. Those are the information we need to get from the client, and they cannot be empty, as you can see here. For the update, the seller, they cannot be empty. Property request, all the strings cannot be empty. If the beds, bath are empty, then it's going to go to 0. There's also a seller request here nested inside of the property request. So also have the delete property, takes an ID and the string key, which cannot be empty. So we have a response, which is basically the same thing as the request, but it's basically what we sent back to the client. It's basically the response. And as you can see, constructor and all the fields are going to be sent back to the client. As you can see, the key is not sent back. cannot see the key. I didn't add it because cannot send back the security key. And lastly, we had the service, property service class. We used AutoWire to implement both of these interfaces. So we created yeah. So here we have all the methods here, the logic. Get properties returns a list of um, properties. Insert property here, property request. This is how we insert a property. So first, when we insert a property, we need to optional sellers. So basically, when I'm trying to add a property, I need to check if the key exists. If a key of the seller exists, it's going to take the information of the seller inside of the database instead of creating a new record of a seller with the same information that already exists in the database. So this is what we do find seller by seller key. Then when I get that seller, I can use those information to create a property object and then add it to the database. If the key is not found, then it's when the key is not found, then it creates a new record of a seller database and adds it to the property. The property creates a new property object and then adds it to the database. Update, basically the same thing. We're trying to find if the ID exists or not. If it doesn't exist, it's going to send back like an error. Property is not found. Then if it's found, then we need to compare the keys. Does they match? So based on the property of the request, key from the property object, key from the request, we check if they're both equal to each other. If they are, then we can proceed to create to update the property status. If not, it throws a key does not match exception. And for the delete, it's basically the same process. We see if the ID is found of the property. Does the key match? If yes, delete the property. If not, throw a 4-1 exception. The key does not match exception. Yeah. So this is basically my CRUD application, and I'm proud of it. So thank you, and goodbye.